So, hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm back here with Cynthia Ellis Topsy, who is joining us from the beautiful rainforest of El Pilar. And
Right.
yes, we're here to talk about cultural differences and culture. So, Mom, I know this came up in the last time in the conversation that we were having in terms of finding love. What are some of the things that we look for? What are some of the things we need to be focused on within ourselves, mainly as the main part of finding love? And also, how we relate to one another and in what context we relate to one another. So I think that it is super appropriate that we chose um, culture as our next topic. In the background, guys, you can see I have this painting. I'm just going to share a little bit about this painting. Mom, I'm trying to give you a visual. This painting here is a painting of my cousin Agre. He was visiting Dangriga from Detroit, and this was the first time he had seen chickens. So you can see him there, like kind of deciding whether or not he wants to feed the chickens, or if the chickens are gonna feed on him, and how that cultural experience really shifted his idea of what it means to be a Garifuna man. Ah! I want to also thank you, everybody who is giving us feedback on relationships and what their concerns are, what their experiences have been dating. I just have to say that when it comes to dating and relationships, I only speak from the wisdom that has been shared with me and the experiences that I have had personally. I am not a relationship psychologist or a couples therapist or marriage counselor. I just speak on what works and what didn't work for me and how I grew out of those experiences. So, Miss Ellis, where do we want to start? We want to start with Garifuna Duowo, because I know this is
Yes.
something that has kept on. This really comes up a lot. Well, this is something that you and I have been talking a lot about. So I think let's talk specifically about Garifuna and Garifuna Duo, since we're both Garifuna women. What does it mean,
Sure.
Garifuna Duo?
Sure. Well, good morning and thanks. In the rainforest, and part of my being in the rainforest is being in tune with nature and myself, and that's a part of culture. It's very amazing to see how plants and trees and nature can guide us in how to use wisdom and have that honor and respect for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a Garifuna, and I wanted to really make a comment about when you were saying that I am famous and all of that. I just wanted to say in all humility that the most important thing for me is really not to have ears and get caught up in the titles. While I do appreciate and accept the honor, I just didn't want to. I want others listening to know that by hearing my journey and my story, that it's possible to be an overcomer. And part of this is knowing oneself, knowing myself, and understanding the Garifuna journey. The Garifuna people are overcomers. We are people who did not succumb to enslavement. As the story goes, in the island of St. Vincent that we call Urume. And that story has carried with us in our DNA and the fabric of who we are, from one generation to the next. So, Garifuna people have been we came on the coastline of Central America, and in Belize especially, we are allowed to settle in the south of the country, and we settle by water. Water is very important for us as a part of our sense of who we are and healing. And so we are more on the coastline of Central America. And the United Nations has been amazed that we have been able to maintain our way of being, our music, our songs, our dress, our food. And the United Nations declared Garifuna as a masterpiece culture for the world. So, having said that, the conversation about women and how we as women, or I as a woman, experience relationship awareness with myself and others is one that I think would be very useful for sharing with others. And it begins, if we look at the rites of passage, because the last program we spoke about how you are ushered into the world at birth, at conception and birthing, and the attitude towards a girl child, and as distinct from a male child, as in many other cultures of the world, the male child is given preference because the interpretation of inheritance and passing down the family name. So that's where I would like us to explore this thing of love. When you marry or when you have a relationship, at least in the ancient ways, the way we used to do it, it is a consultation with family members. When you are marrying, you are married into a family, and sometimes, just like in other cultures, these relationships or marriages would be prearranged because the parents and the grandparents would acknowledge that they know you when you're growing up and who would be a best fit or a match for you. It might not necessarily have been said like that in the culture and way of being, but certainly it was understood and encouraged.
Right. I think that's one of the things that I experienced firsthand. I don't know what how it was with you with Granny and Grandpa, but with me, when I had decided to, and I'll say decide, we can come back to that in another segment, but when I had decided to stay with them when I was having my first child, and I really wanted her to get that Garifuna experience and to have them guide me in relationship, because I had also decided to not stay with her father. I could remember specifically my grandmother asking me who the child's father's family was. We're not going to get into the story as to what she said or didn't say, but it turns out that they knew each other. And so she had some sort of a reference point as to how to relate to her great-grandchild. Before that, I always took her asking me about my friends and potential suitors as just being inquisitive or just wanting to get too much into my business. But it was really so that later on I understood that, the people that you get yourself involved with permanently in such a way reflect a lot, or will tell you a lot about what the journey is going to look like for you and that person later on, because family culture has family pathologies, and other things become more important as well, where she talked a lot about are you guys practicing the same type of belief systems when it comes to even something like money and finances, spirituality? Are you both Catholic? Are you, what is it that you're going to be teaching when you create your own family nucleus that is in alignment with what we have taught you, is really the question that she was asking, which I then later on uncovered was what she was asking through, what are their last name? Where they come from? She had this way of being like, let's say the person's name was Susan. Susan what? And then Grandpa would say, so what are your intentions? What direction is this going in? Like, he had a way of not saying, okay, you have to do this, and this in life, but please be aware that these are the things that you have to be clear about. And are you clear about those things? And if you're not, maybe you should be thinking about getting some clarity. And So I just wanted to put that in there and add that to it.
And I didn't understand it at the time, but I do understand now, in the sense that the elders have the historical memory and knowledge, and they have seen the patterns of certain families, and it wasn't as if they were discriminating so much as they know what has worked and what works.
Right.
And so as I was moving into interacting with other cultures, my elders knew that there were different beliefs. I wanted to touch a little bit on the rites of passage, like from birth to aging. What I appreciate is that once a courtship, like my parents courted from my mother was 13, that would have been scandalous in this day and age. And however, it was an open presentation. My dad to her dad. My dad went to her dad. And so there was that awareness that interest was there. And it had to be done in the presence of the family so that there was that transparency over time, I will have to ask my mother, your grandmother, how that worked. And I think that we are very blessed, our family, that we have 4 generations where we can tap into that knowledge base and get more clarity,
Right, definitely.
However, as I mentioned last time, when I was born, relatives were there to usher me into the world, and I find that is a very powerful thing, that there was that level of support of the woman. We didn't have hospitals and doctors. There were midwives, and the approach to women from that birthing process was inclusive. So the family was present and involved, and there were things that were women-only discussions in terms of your pregnancy, your prenatal, and your postnatal care. So I think that is a very important part in terms of awareness and respect for the woman, the being woman, and the birthing process.
Let me just echo on. Let me just echo.
So the point I wanted to highlight is that for marriage and having a child, the responsibility was not on 2 people or 1 person. It is the entire village that embraced this child, for better or for worse, in addition to the courtship process. And later on, what I learned in the culture, when I became more aware of Garifuna Duowo. Garifuna Duowo is a state of being and knowingness of being a Garifuna, meaning like the practices, and a lot of it is very spiritual. It's awareness I began to appreciate that there are many guidelines that we as women receive, which are, I wouldn't say secret, but let me say sacred, that they were discussed within the confines, the special confines of the female circle. So even though we were of the same culture, there are certain things that are not discussed with men. So we as women would have very intimate discussions about sexuality and sex and the female body. We would be willing to strip ourselves naked, literally, in some of the healing, in the healing rituals that we would have. And one of the rituals we have is like a Thanksgiving and a celebration of life. So early in the morning, like 4 o'clock, we would go, say in one of the Garifuna communities, we will go to where the river empties into the sea, and then we will go into the sea and bathe naked, half naked, and then we'll go and rinse in the river, and it's a part of our cleansing. And I think that is that being intentional has been a powerful means of continually being a part of a healing process. So in our communities where we have not had psychiatrists or psychologists or labeling counselors like that. We have ways of being that support us as women.
So I think you touched on two really, really good points just now, Mom, and I really want to address them together and also individually. We talk about how, as I experienced with Cynthia, my oldest, that um that care and that rites of passage, becoming a mother with my grandmother, and I think I must have on some subconscious level instinctively gravitated towards her to be there for the first 3 years and my entire pregnancy. And I just wanted to, secondly, well, okay, yeah, so it's 3 points actually. Secondly, I'd like to acknowledge if you have had such an experience, I think you shared with me that that was the experience that you had when you had me. When you had me in Dangriga, and all of my father's family was present in, the anointing of the tongue and the piercing of the ears and coming to see me in the morning. And thirdly, living now in the West and having met so many Garifuna here in Germany, I'd like us to talk a little bit about how our cultural shift is taking place. Because now we're starting to get into a culture, a Garifuna culture duo that does include things like going to the gym and psychiatry and all of these other, we are still Garifuna. But what did that mean? What does that mean? And what will that mean for the generation to come? So I'm going to write that down while you respond to that. Oh, so we've gone to like coaching sessions together. We have broadened our horizons when it comes to personal development. And so I really want us to talk a little bit about what Garifuna used to mean, what it means now, and what it will mean for the future Garifuna culture and generations to come.
Okay, well, I think that Garifuna, what it means is a personal decision on a journey. It's like a sojourn, There are some general principles that are handed down to us, and how each person chooses to engage is left on them. I wanted to say that based on something you said earlier, that there's a fact that you are born Garifuna, that you didn't maybe necessarily consciously choose it in your mind, but like it is part of our spiritual DNA. So there is just the fact that you are, or just for example, the fact that you have a black skin has some historical and spiritual memory in it that you will be able to tap into spiritually. If we understand, or I understand that I'm a spiritual being in a physical body, then that power taps in to manifest itself in the natural. So also I wanted to suggest that there are different words and labels that mean the same thing. So it really doesn't, it matters, but it doesn't really matter the name. It's the process and the journey that is more important as you go through life over time. And one of the powers of the Garifuna Duo is that we believe in the spirit of our ancestors. We believe that those who came before us are still with us, and that is like maybe like in the Christian religion and faith, they believe in angels and saints and all of that, So I'm very careful in sharing the information because interpretation of the information can get distorted. So I don't usually go into the details because I like to honor the fact that each person experiences the journey in their own way. So the question that you're asking is an important question that each one needs to explore. In my journey, I have found that no matter where I am in the world, some of the common elements of who I am as a Garifuna shows up in other people's expression of themselves. And so like I feel at oneness with others. And so like through this program that you're doing, I believe that there are others who can relate, who are from different cultures and who can appreciate either something they have experienced or something that they would like to experience. Um, does that answer the question, or is there any area else that
I mean,
you'd
I
like
I
me to
guess
touch on?
um I guess what I was kind of looking for is more like a storytelling, like what you did with some of the other times that we've talked about. You know, when you spoke about when I was born, for example, and
Okay.
my
Oh, yes,
family was
yes, yes.
present.
Okay, right. All right, that's a good point. So when I arrived back, okay, I studied in Europe, and the more I studied, I was in the classroom in Europe. Every time as my professors were speaking, I would be asking myself, what's the relationship of what they're saying to what's happening in my community? That would show up for me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so as soon as I completed my studies, I went straight back to the Garifuna community.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there I was approached by some Garifuna women who were older than me. They could have been like my mother, grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow these women saw in me something that I did not know. They called me leader. They called me like an elder. And that I learned that eldership has nothing to do with age. And they were seeking counsel from me. And I was seeking counsel from them. So from that whole time, I asked them about all the Garifuna food that women not only cook but plant and produce. So I would go to the farm with them. And then I realized that in going to the farm, it wasn't just a physical act of putting cassava or manioc into the ground. It was a relationship of talking, sharing, singing, storytelling, and so on, which was very powerful. And so we formed a support group of women. But it's not like we formed it. The formation was already there as a way of being in the community. And so when I became pregnant, these women became available to me in terms of what a woman does to prepare. So when I had baby, which is when I had you, then they said, well, part of it is that you get your earrings, so your ears are bored. And so it was three of them. Five of them would come to our house and meet. And they are the ones who did the boring of your ears, because that's part of what it means to be a woman, to be adorned. And then your great grandmother actually came for about 10 days at your early life. And every evening she would come, and it was almost like a welcoming of you, in not just into the family, but also into the world. And like transferring in the Bible, they say like Elijah and Elisha, like Elijah would drop that mantle of connectivity onto Elisha. So that is how I experience a lot of this transfer of knowledge. It's not like you go to a class and you write notes. It's like a connection, a spiritual connection, which is very powerful. And that's a lot of what women do. There wasn't a lot of talking. It was more like it's like codes and parables that women would know. For example, the way how you tie your hair, the way how you would a piece of cloth. We are able to do things with cloth in 100 different ways, and it has a language of its own for women. So this is one of the things that I would like to encourage us women to look into, that we come with something, we don't come with nothing. But the more we become aware, or let's say the more I became aware of who I am and who I am coming from, then I walk into the power of that.
I like you touched on two things that really stood out for me, that I think I can identify with very strongly. When I was preparing for this lesson yesterday, I was lying down thinking about all the all the elder women that I was drawn to in your absence, and also how I have started to step into the role as leader. here in Germany, where people come to me for advice. Younger people of Black African descent come to my house and we have conversations about um, living in Germany. That's a broad umbrella of discussion that we have, you know, raising
Right.
raising a child inside of an intercultural relationship, how to comb your baby hair, you know, like what products to buy for kinky hair versus curly hair. Even even my husband, who is European German, learning how to do the girl's hair, you know, and what that took, and even the openness to be able to do that. um
Right.
I find that I can relate to that very strongly. And when I was very young and I had Cynthia, I can remember going to a bookstore asking for a book on pregnancy because I didn't know, you know, and my grandparents were a little bit in shock, so they were not at that place at that time. They were later on able to help, but they were first in shock, and I was very hungry for information. And the person who ran the bookstore was a midwife and a certified nurse in the States, and who was of Black African descent, and who just was like, "Come here, darling." You know, she literally took me under her wing, and we became really good friends to the point where she was present at Cynthia's birth. And was sort so when you talk about that interconnectivity and finding similarities within people all over the world, I really want to hold on to that, because there is Garifuna and then there is
Right.
Garifuna, you know. And I
Right.
think that that's one of the beautiful things about indigenous women. The second thing I also
Right.
wanted to touch on a little bit, Mom, because we have about a few more, 10 more minutes maybe, to talk about the relationship between men and women. I remember, and I want to start with this point because I just feel like Spirit is telling me that this is the most important point to make right now. I remember I was
Right.
going on a date as a single mother, quote unquote single mother, and I was going away for the weekend with the baby, with Cynthia. And my friend at the time, my boyfriend at the time, was telling me, you know, don't worry about anything. It's all on me. I'll cover everything. I'll take care of everything. So my grandfather asked me, did I have any money? And I said to him, well, no, he's going to take care of everything. I don't need to take any money with me. And he was livid. He was upset. And you know, I really have to, I think I have to say this because we get a wrong impression about Garifuna men of a certain age or Garifuna men in general. But he said to me, you never you never do that. You make sure as a woman you can always take care of yourself and your responsibilities. Don't depend on no man for take care of you. He has the privilege and the honor of taking care of you, but it is your responsibility to take care of yourself. Wow, mind blown right there. Just like, you know, that in its whole self told me where he stood when it came to relationships, and where he stood with what does it mean to be a woman. And I really want us to talk some more about that because it keeps on coming up in conversation. I am a Garifuna woman. What do you think that is meaning for us in this day and age?
Yeah. I really thanking you for that point because it's also a part of being transparent and honest about um, men from the Garifuna perspective. If we look at the way of men from a Western perspective or the other perspective, it would be very harsh. So the Garifuna way, there's a different definition of roles of men and women, not just in the family, but household and the village.
Mm.
So, like for example, my great grandmother, my great grandmother, who would be your great great grandmother, took care of my dad when he was a baby. He was handed to her and he and his sister. And so, in recognition of whatever the issues were with his parents, the village took the responsibility of caring and then caring for the children. All the children are our children. So grandma, she recognized that my father and his sister needed a male presence or male energy interaction. And so she had um, my dad assigned to different men in the community to teach him how to become a man. So that's one part that I observe in the story. The other thing I recognize is that the presence of the male in the home is very important, and he's given a special kind, like the leader, like leadership, recognition, and awareness. It's not a competition, it's a balance. And the intervention is not, a man is not a woman, and so a man doesn't express himself the same way as we do. And sometimes we as women, or let's say I as a woman, would expect behavior to be based on my understanding of life, and that's not right.
I love that.
So I noticed that my dad was always present in my life. Even if he wasn't physically present, he was present. Present meaning, I started off earlier on by saying that we are spiritual beings in a physical body. So if you're just looking at it as a physical presence, then you miss the fact that there is that presence, and part of Garifuna Duowo goes beyond the physical. So when we're speaking about coming from St. Vincent that we call Yurume, Yurume is not just a physical place. Yurume is a state of being and connectivity. So like when the Garifuna people, when the Garifuna men, when my dad is anywhere in the world and I'm in South America, in Guyana, going through stress, and I don't even pick up a phone and tell my dad what's going on, because he and I are connected, and his love transcends boundaries and borders, and he's always present. He able to, I call it the coconut wireless, he sent something and he picked up that phone and he called me. And I could tell you many stories like that. So when we are looking at the relationship with one another and with women, and with one, like my dad, like Keisha, your sister, was able to sense something happening with her dad. And she called me. No physical communication. So that's one part. The other part that I would like to, the part that you talk about, that physical presence and that caring and that being that guard. When you have a man beside you, be it a brother, a cousin, a relative, like when you met your husband, right? You were with a cousin.
Yes.
He was like your guide. He was like your
buffer.
protector. He was like, he looking out for you.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
When you have an experience with some man taking advantage of you, your brother come and dealt with the situation.
Dealt.
These are some examples,
putting it lightly.
not to be scandalous, but moving forward to capture them, embrace and celebrate them, and shift the conversation from not only speaking about how horrible men behave and what they don't do and they don't take their responsibilities and all of that, to balance it off and listen to what's going on with men and how to receive and embrace that male presence, and to ask the question, why are we not doing it?
Right.
Where are the gaps?
Right. I love that so much, because I think that being in this space and in this time, and having the opportunity to have spoken with so many different men about what it means to be a man, what it means to be a father, what it means to be a husband, and what is expected. I think as women, or as a woman, I often forget the importance of, like you said, that men express themselves in a different way from us. And it's not a wrong way or a right way, it's just that way. And we do them I have done a great disservice to a lot of different men from various backgrounds, in just expecting them to to express themselves in the way that I want them to, and not giving honor and respect to the fact that they're even expressing themselves. Period. So I really think that Garifuna Duo is something that is gonna have to be a two-part process, because so many other things are coming to mind, and we're just touching on the surface. I'm gonna put this, let's just put this out there and get some feedback, because I really want us to talk about Garifuna, how it has shown up in your relationship, because now now that I'm thinking, I want to talk about our personal experiences, without getting into, or let's try not to get into the political part of the church versus the people and Dogo and all of those things. I mean, it is what it is.
Right.
And like we said, this is just a finding experience. And you know what? I think it's a beautiful one. And there is a lot of history and a lot of experiences that we can still share on this topic. So, anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to conclude with 3 points. One is that I am not suggesting that we haven't had challenges with men. I'm suggesting that as we have had these challenges, one of the power of Garifuna Duo is that we have some mechanisms in place in our culture for the healing. That's one. The second thing I'd like us to explore some more is the issue of sexuality and our transparency with our sexuality and sensuality, which, if it's juxtaposed with other cultures and the world's interpretation of it, can be distorted. And I'm speaking specifically of dance and music and different ways that we have of expressing ourselves, which is very beautiful and I believe very healthy. The third thing I would like us to explore has to do with looking at men and women in the context of family and household. And whilst we are focusing on the specifics of male, female, if we can look at that in the context of the bigger picture and how to formulate in this so-called modern world now, what lessons can we build on from that journey that we have experienced of knowingness and awareness to move mature forward.
Beautiful. I love it. So I wrote all of those things down. Guys, you heard it. We will be talking next time about healing, sexuality, family, and household. I really believe that that's going to either turn into 4 or 2 segments more, maybe. Like we could talk about one thing in itself. And so it would be, I guess I could think of some stories right now that might be a little bit controversial. People gonna come for you, so we could think about how to tell the story differently.
Right.
Also, yes, I'm very excited. We have gone over by 8 minutes, but that's okay. Thank you so much again for stopping by, Mom. You have a great day at your retreat. This is Sunday, guys, as promised. We will be back again next week, so I'll see you again later. Bye.